But honey, it followed me home. I didn't want it. It just, I was talking to it and it was nice and it came up and it was nice to me and it was really pretty. I honestly, honey, I walked out of the store. I did. I walked out of the store. It followed me. Then when I got home, it was still there. I know the deal. If it follows you home and you name it, you have to keep it. I mean, it was an hour drive from the music store, and I might have, you know, named it Sparkles because it is a beautiful red sparkle. Sparkles followed me into the house, and now, well, you know the deal. If you name it, you have to keep it. Yeah, I know. I got plenty of amps. I got amps. I got modelers. I got everything, and it's kind of old. I know it's old. Well, it's not as old as nearly as old as I am, but it comes from the early 2000s. And but honey, it's red sparkle. I mean, come on, and it's got glowing cat eyes. I have to keep it. Okay, we'll work that out. We'll work that out later. Thank you, my kind wife. So anyway, this amp is an early era Bad Cat Hot Cat 30, not a 30R. The 30R was the reverb model that I think came out in about 2005. And so this was built in the early Mark Sampson days when Mark Sampson and James Heydrich originally kind of formed Bad Cat, and Sampson designed the Hot Cat as the first, Class A high gain amp. Before that, I had been playing mostly Marshalls my whole career, and in the 80s, a Seymour Duncan, which was, very Marshall-like the way I set it up. I took a spell with the DC-30 when I was playing with Fish, and the DC-30, the matchless DC-30, and I loved it, but it was a little too chimey for me, and I didn't go along with the EL-84 thing, and then I'd heard that there was a company formed by, that Mark Sampson had gone to, and so I reached out to them in LA when I got the gig with Porcupine Tree, and Stephen Wilson and I were looking for small combos that we could tour with that wouldn't cost us too much to physically ship and move around, but that would roar. So we needed something gutsier. He had been playing Voxes and I had been playing DC-30s, and I wanted to move more towards that EL-34 sound. So I reached out and I connected with James at Bad Cat, and we had a great conversation. He says, well, we're working on this amp. We're developing it. I've got a few copies of it, and it is a Class A EL-34 hot amp, a real gutsy amp. And so I got him to send me one, and he sent me a 212 red sparkle Hot Cat 30. And I fell in love with it. I bought it, and Steven took my word for it, and he bought the single 12 version, which this is a 112 Hot Cat 30 from the same era. They were the split images of this amp. And we rehearsed for the first time with them in New York before our first live shows, and they roared. I mean, it was just like, whoa, I couldn't even believe such a thing existed, We started touring Hot Cats, and we toured them up until 2007. So from 2002 to 2007, we probably did about 250 shows with them. I eventually bought a second one and sent that one to Europe so that I didn't have to ship my amps back and forth. So I had a Hot Cat 30 over there and a Hot Cat 30 here. And in '07, Steven decided he wanted to switch over to heads and 4x12s and go to a bigger thing. And he bought three Bad Cat Lynx heads and 4x12s matching, and left one of the rigs here and had two of them in Europe. I took my old 4x12 that my dad had bought me when I was 14 years old, and it was spray painted black, and I took that Marshall Cameron head, and I switched my effects setup at the time to that head had an effects loop in it, and so I kind of went down that whole rabbit hole of putting all of my reverbs and delays and everything into the effects loop, and it worked really well. But I still loved my Hot Cats, and eventually, how it gets. Music is tough, and you got to sell things, and you can't keep things you love. So I sold my black Hot Cat, and I held on to my red sparkle one for a long, long time until I just couldn't hold on to it anymore. And then after Porcupine Tree ended, I ended up selling it, and I regretted that. But hey, man, life. So over the last few years, I've always been playing my Marshalls and things like that. But the Bad Cat Hot Cat 30 was always on my mind. Recently, over the last year, I reconnected with Bad Cat, Matthew Smith, the UK rep, the world rep actually, and I are good friends. And he suggested I try the Jet Black, which is an EL84 based amp. And I was kind of unsure about it because I'm not an EL84 guy. But he's like, look, man, it's a new design. It's got reverb in it and two channels. It's super gainy. And I got them to send me one. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, is it amazing. I think probably some of you caught me doing the demo of this head before. And I recently recorded it for Colin Edwin's ORK project. I did a solo for them using this head and through my old 4x12, the one my dad got me, actually, when I was 14. And it just sounded amazing. And I love this head. And it got me thinking, it got me thinking, it got me thinking. And then I heard that recently Bad Cat had realigned with Mark Sampson. And I thought, oh my God, here we go. And that they were starting to make point-to-point stuff again. And this is a PCB head, but but so are my Marshalls. They're from the mid 70s. They're PCB boards. And, so I'm just going to throw that out there right now. Whatever the difference is, I don't know. They're both great. Now, I haven't had this head on the road. I had this type of amp on the road for 5 years in that point-to-point configuration, and it never went down one time. And I had two of them, and I don't think Steve's combo ever went down either. I mean, we just, unless a tube went or something stupid like that. But the amps themselves just were bulletproof, amazing, tough. So, there's the Jet Black is a lot less expensive than the new Bad Cat point-to-point amps. But I mean, if you've got the if you've got the coin and you can step out, I mean, maybe try and step into one of the point-to-point models. But so anyway, I got thinking about that, and I haven't had a chance to get my hand on it. And then, of course, last week they made the announcement that Mark was coming back to do some work with Bad Cat. And I thought, well, that's neat. And so I started going through my head, gas is a real thing, man. I mean, I've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 heads there, a 57 Tweed. I'm kind of set up, but are you ever really set up? I mean, really, are you ever really? And I came back from this long trip to Europe, and as I was flying home, I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be neat to have my old sparkle red Hot Cat back? And I thought, well, that's gone. And I just kind of trolled reverb a little bit, man. And there's just, nothing from that era, certainly not in Red Sparkle. And I have a couple friends in town. I started calling around, and I called an old buddy of mine who actually has one of the early era Sampson 1x12 Hot Cats, because I got it for him through the company. And I was able to get him. He was a young musician working really hard at the time, and I was able to set him up with James, and James hooked him up and sold him an amp at cost. And to this day, he still has it, and his is a silver sparkle, and it's absolutely beautiful. So he's got a new shop. It's called Redwood Vintage Guitars. If you get a chance, look it up. They're in St. Petersburg, Florida, and Sean Kyle always has great stuff at Redwood. And I just called him out of the blue. I said, man, do you ever come across the old Hot Cats anymore? I'd love an early Hot Cat. He says, dude, I just recently picked up did a little estate thing. And part of it was an early Sampson era Hot Cat 30 in red sparkle, a 1x12. I kid you not. I had a couple other amps lying around that, let's just say, they weren't getting a lot of love at the time. The next morning, I literally chucked them in the back of the car, drove directly to the shop, and Sparkles followed me home. That's right. And I'm very happy because Sparkles was well cared for. And I didn't even play it at the shop because I knew, like I said, I've done 250 shows with Bad Cat, Hot Cat 30s. So I know what that animal is. So I brought it home. I plugged it in. I run a little Klon setup, and I set it and cranked it, jacked it into this, and pulled out my PRS. And holy crap. I couldn't believe it. I had forgotten how wonderful, wonderful, wonderful these things sound. So let me tell you a little bit about the Hot Cat 30 and what's so wonderful about them. Number one, built like a tank. Everything Bad Cat does is built like a tank. Now, I'm going to clarify. I do some work with Bad Cat, and that I reviewed that head, and I love that head, and I record that head. But this is on me. I did this, as my wife will attest to, on my own. I just wanted that old Hot Cat 30 back. So this is not a sponsored video. This is just me telling you how I mean, and it's kind of funny because recently I've been getting a lot of stick because I did a video explaining the quote silent stage, because when I tour a quad Cortex and it works fantastic for our touring setup. But I got to be honest with you, when I'm at home, I've got a rack full of amps. I mostly use amps at home, and then I keep my quad and I tour my quad. Now there's some special effect things and some really cool things that the quad does that nothing does. And I will use a quad to get those things. But at home, I'm mostly recording through my heads. And so when I went to get this, the idea was that there was no idea. I just wanted a red sparkle Hot Cat 30. So I bring it home, I plug it in, it sounds amazing. Let me tell you about the amp. So in the early days, there's several versions. This is the original version with no reverb. It does not have an effects loop. I'm an effects loop guy, but I always made this amp work without it. I was always able, and Steven always did too. And we always made our effects work really well. And if you listen to Porcupine Tree, we use a lot of effects. So the number one best thing about it is obviously it's got this really cool light up logo, and it's red sparkle. No. So it's got a really gutsy transformer in it. It's Class A. It's EL34s in it. It's got a toggle switch on the back from where you can go solid state or tube rectifier. Thank you. Tube rectifier. Solid state or tube rectifier. I kind of always went with the tube rectifier side of it because I kind of like the sag, So now it has two channels, and this is the great thing about these two channels. One is the gutsy hot side, and there's a couple controls in here that work with the hot side, and then the other is a clean side. Now with the clean side, you get a little bit of EQ with the clean, but mostly it's just this volume works with the clean. And what we used to do in Porcupine Tree is I had gig rig switching systems. So one side of the gig rig went hot, the other side of the gig rig output went to the clean channel, because in Porcupine Tree we were back and forth with hot and clean sounds all the time. Hot, clean, hot, clean, hot, clean, and had to be done in an instant. And the great thing about this was this is a beautiful, beautiful Class A clean sound. Not quite as chimey as an EL84 amp, but God, just really beautiful. And I was able to use that for years. Now, the other cool thing about this amp is you can also combine both inputs and use the hot channel and the clean channel at the same time. And it creates a very, very unique hot sound that's got some of the clean energy in it. And so I had, basically three sounds going, because on the gig rig, I could switch. I could pick channel 1, I could pick channel 2, or I could move my little dip switches and have channel 1 and 2 at the same time and run them. So I had three different sounds going with this amp. And I love that. The other thing about it is that, back then, stage volume was a thing. You want it to be loud, but you didn't want to crush, you didn't want to peel the faces off the front row. Like when I switched over to 4x12s, I actually was asked to turn my 4x12s around. Steven had his going forward. Ian had enough to deal with that. And then so for all of the rest of my time with Porcupine Tree, my 4x12 either faced backwards or to the side away from the soundman, because it was kind of loud. And this amp really had that. But the other great thing about this amp is at a low volume, super low volume. I use this in a lot of club gigs, or the 212 version, and it was never too much. I could always back it off, unless I was just playing too loud, and then I would be told to just back it off. So I'd back it off. It doesn't lose the beauty of the tone of this amp. Now, it's got a Marshall vibe because it's an EL34 amp. But if you go back and listen to any, I don't want to say super early Porcupine Tree, but let's say the era between 2002 and 2007, we're both using them, and our sounds are different. We're both different kinds of players. We had different kinds of effects. So the amps would really adapt to each player and create kind of our own unique sounds. And I love that about this amp. People say, "What are you playing? What are you playing?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a Baghouse, not a Marshall. It's not a Boogie. It's not anything else. It's its own thing." And that was one of the things I love about the modern Baghouse. The Jet Black, for example, is its own thing, and it's such a great thing. Now, there's so many great amp companies out there, and I don't want you to think that I'm sitting here saying Bagcat is the only way to go. But I do want to say the company is putting a ton of effort into their lines these days and creating some of the finest sounding and gutsiest and beautiful sounding amps going right now. So for me to be reunited with that, and actually reunited with something that I can name Sparkles, is it's I know. It worked though. It worked on my wife. I named it. I got to keep it. So she had, what am I going to do with this amp? Because when I tour with Vertical Horizon, I have to tour a quad Cortex because we don't have the ability to ship amps right now. I'm hoping one day that we will have that ability. I'd love to drag this out and give it a run for its money. But I'm not doing a whole lot of club gigs at home either. But I can record it, and I set it up right here, and I'm in a writing phase right now. So what this has become over the last time period since I've had this amp, it's been a week or two, I have turned this into my writing amp. I just plug directly into it, and I just start writing, and I've got some great effects in front of it, and man, it's just been really inspirational, and I have fallen in love with this amp all over again. So it has added another tone to the palette, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop talking because I've talked for way too long. But that's part of the gig. You know what I'm saying? I want to explain what this is and what it does. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to set it up in a way in another room so I can crank the living crap out of it and show you how it sounds recorded. John Wesley, the Journeyman Guitarist, switching over to loud noises soon. All right, I'm back. I wanted to give you a short run through of what Sparkles sounds like. Now remember, Sparkles is a 112 combo amp that I'm treating like a Marshall half stack, basically. I used to get those kind of sounds out of it, out of a 212, and Steve used to get those kind of sounds out of his 112. So I've got it set up just like I would set up my 4x12. Now the great thing about Sparkles is, again, it is a 2-channel amp. I know Sparkles, the Hot Cat. Let's go back to the Hot Cat. The Hot Cat's a 2-channel amp, clean channel, hot channel. You can combine the 2 channels at the same time. I'm going to give you an example of each of those sounds. The guitar I have chosen for this was the guitar that was in my last video. This is Christine. A few people from the last video asked to hear what Christine sounded like. And so I'm going to give Christine a run through. What I've got set up here is a pedal board similar to what I would have been touring in the Porcupine Tree days, and for honestly in a lot of gigs after that. I usually use a Klon for my hot sound. Right now for my solo sound, I would stack the Klon. I really like the horse meat. Typically I use the Analog Man King of Tone, but that's on another board right now. But I've come to really like the PRS horse meat as that second stage for a solo sound, and I'll demonstrate that. And then I've got a mixture of different effects in here that I'll run through. So all the effects are in front of the amp. Hot Cat does not have an effects loop. Typically I use amps with an effects loop, but back in those days we were using Hot Cats, no effects loop, hitting everything from the front end, and honestly it sounded great. So let me give you first the hot channel, straight guitar to amp with nothing in it. Okay, some people be looking for an edge of breakup sound here. I'm kind of in that mentality that I was back in the days when I used to play in Porcupine Tree. So this is a little beyond breakup. This isn't really edge of breakup. This is, well, this is breakup. So let me give you some more of that. as you can see, really nice, really gutsy. And I'm using a volume pedal to back off and bring in some of the sounds. So this is it full on. So you notice you can use the volume pedal or your volume knob to back off. If you hear any Rush references in this demo, it's because it's the day before I leave for the Bubba Bash. I've been practicing the 3 songs I've been playing, and they just kind of creep into my subconscious now, so you may hear elements of it. So that is this guitar straight to the hot side. Again, I would call that a little beyond the edge of breakup. Now, typically what I would do with a clon, I treat the clon, you know, everyone treats it differently. I like the fact that you can kick a clon on, or one of the clon clones, or anything clonish, and basically it lifts the sound of the amp, gives it a little more ass, tightens up the low end, and doesn't change the sound of the amp. So typically, while I was playing in Porcupine Tree, I would have a clon running on the next phase of gain, and I'm going to give you a little example of what that sounds like. So this is without. Really nice, really tight. And then with, it's going to take it over the edge a little bit. Now, what I love about adding the clon is it really maintains a really nice, I don't know how to describe it, a real tight distortion as you back off. So if you're here, just, I mean, really, that's a really good sound from a 112 combo amp. I've got 2 mics on it. I've got a SM57 and I've got the classic Sennheiser 421 combo. I've got them both running into one channel of Pro Tools through the Neve, the 473s. So it's a Neve channel. So it's you know, it's a pretty gutsy thing. So I want to give you an idea of the solo sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the horse meat to go over the top of this. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of delay just to make it, you know, a little more, you know, a little more rocktastic. I don't know. But here we go. I'm bringing in the Analog Man delay. This is a really old one. I can't even remember the number of it, but it's just a really cool analog delay because I love Analog Man. All right, so here we go. Klon, PRS Horse Meat, Analog Man delay, and Christine through the Hot Cat. Going back to just the Klon and the delay. All right, hot channel of the Hot Cat, Clown Centaur, sometimes bringing in the PRS horse meat on top of that, with the old analog man, analog delay in front of that. It's just a beautiful thing, and this was very similar to the setup I would have ran during the Porcupine Tree days. So that Hot Cat just has it. And let's remind you, before I switch channels, what it sounds like, again, straight to the amp. Just a beautiful, gutsy sound, just kind of like I remember it. All right, so let's go to the clean channel. So this is the clean channel. Now, the clean channel doesn't have as many active controls on the Hot Cat. There's a lot of tone controls. There's a lot of tone shaping in the hot channel, and it would take me hours to go over all the different combinations. But here's the clean channel. This is a guitar direct to amp. A little bit of reverb out of the H9 there. So it's just a beautiful, you know. Now, as you can see, it's not a super, well, okay, you can get a crystal clean sound out of the clean channel, but that's never the way I've done it. It's more of, I've heard a couple of the Nashville guys call it the implied clean. So there's a little tiny bit of breakup in there, but I've got it really loud to compete with the loud side of the hot side. And it's just a beautiful sounding thing. That was a little bit of with the H9 on there. I think I've got a halo in here as well. So let me see what it sounds like with the the Keeley Halo. So as you can see, even with the delays and reverbs in front of the amp, it's just a great sound. Again, this will give you just an idea of direct. It's all about the touch, you know, it's how much touch do you have, how clean you want it. So that's the clean side. The Hot Cat 30, I spent many years with it, many gigs. I loved it. This one, Sparkles, the red Sparkle Hot Cat followed me home, and I love it. So that's it. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of a... Christine, direct to the Hot Cat 30. I'm John Wesley. I am the Journeyman Guitarist. I'm here every week. Please come back and hang out. I've got a Patreon if you'd like to support me in my crazy creative endeavors. I'm working on a new record before I head back out on tour. And I'm doing all kinds of things, so come support me and hang out with me on Patreon. I'm going to be doing some live stuff over there as well. Thank you for this really long video, but it's such a great amp. And I just wanted to get deep. I didn't want to do a surface thing. I really wanted to go deep on this. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of that. And I hope as you go down the line, man, check out some Bad Cats. They've done great things. They have a great history to build on. Mark Sampson's back on the team as well. Thank you to Matthew Smith for connecting me with the Jet Black and kind of reconnecting me with my inspiration to go back to the roots of Bad Cat. Me, Christine, and Sparkles saying, have a wonderful day. Journeyman Guitarist, out.